Stop putting this poison on your skin. Melanated people are being lied to about the effects of UV exposure on our skin.
Nearly 100,000 Americans are diagnosed with melanoma every year in the U.S. That's the most serious type of skin cancer. A recent study shows that men are more vulnerable than women, and black men are at the highest risk.
And they're determined to debunk this prevalent myth within the black community.
Black doesn't crack.
And it does. There is a myth where we don't need to wear sunscreen. We don't have to hydrate our skin in such a way where we have a natural protection from the sun. And that's not always the case, because we are also, as a people of color, prone to skin cancers, prone to melanomas, prone to so many other diagnoses sun-related if we're not protecting our skin.
Give me strength. Now, as you saw, those clips attempted to promote the idea that black people are more susceptible and more at risk from melanoma. However, this study was conducted by the CDC in 2019 in the US, so relevant to the clips that you just saw. And as you can see, white people are almost 30 times more likely to contract melanoma than black people. Now, this is in stark contrast to the clips that you just saw and a lot of misinformation that is being promoted on social media and in the general mainstream media also. There's more. Now, this study was conducted in 2020, and this study is called the Global Burden of Cutaneous Melanoma. And if we want to do a direct comparison between a white and a black population, for instance, we could take the population of West Africa here, population 400 million people, only 955 cases of melanoma. Whereas if we contrast that to Western Europe, we have a population of 200 million people, so that's half the population, and 65,000 cases. So half the population, 65 times the amount of cases. That's 130 times the likelihood of contracting melanoma as a white Western European as opposed to a black West African. And bear in mind that the UV is much stronger along the equator where West Africa is, as opposed to Western Europe where you have far less direct UV exposure. We can see in the same report that the rates of melanoma in Africa are so low, they don't even have their own bar on this rates chart. They're just kind of grouped together in other, with places like the Pacific Islands and Melanesia.
People should be wearing sunscreen every single day. And we like to tell people, reapply, reapply, reapply
Our
your
little
sunscreen.
hashtag is reapply till you die.
Now, if you're not going to listen to anything else I've said, please listen to this.
People with darker skin have more melanin in their skin than those with lighter skin. Melanin acts as a physical barrier to UV light, causing UV rays to scatter, preventing it from penetrating into the deeper skin tissues. Since UV radiation is the main risk factor for melanoma, having more melanin in your skin gives better protection against UV damage. And that's why we see such low incidence rates of melanoma in black people. But melanomas do happen in black people. They just tend to happen less often and on parts of the body that don't get as much sun, like the palms of the hands and soles of the feet. This is known as acral melanoma. Scientists still aren't sure of the underlying causes for this type of melanoma, but from the little research that has been done specifically on black patient populations, there doesn't appear to be a connection between acral melanoma and UV exposure. There doesn't appear to be a connection between acral melanoma and UV exposure.
Josh Paschal was a sophomore on the University of Kentucky's football team when he discovered a strange mark on the bottom of his foot.
How small was it?
If you put a dot of a pin on your foot, it was about that size.
That dot turned out to be a rare form of melanoma, the deadliest type of skin cancer. Paschal needed multiple surgeries and immunotherapy to remove it.
Now, what you may have gathered from that clip is that the type of melanoma that melanated people are at risk of contracting is called acral melanoma. And this melanoma has actually got nothing to do with UV exposure. In this study investigating the links between UV exposure and melanoma rates, the study reads, a higher mean UV index was significantly associated with an increase in melanoma incidence only in non-Hispanic whites. Negative but not significant correlations with incidence were observed in blacks. So the suggestion of this study is actually UV exposure increases the risk of melanoma in whites, but the lack of UV increases the risk of melanoma in blacks. And there is a reason for this. The reason for this is acral melanoma actually develops in places not exposed to the sun. So these are places like the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, parts of your genitals that don't get regular sun exposure. It's allegedly, and I say allegedly because I'm skeptical, but it's allegedly the thing that killed Bob Marley was the cancer in his toe was actually acral melanoma. And as you can see from the clips that I played earlier, it seems to be the leading cause of melanoma in melanated populations.
To protect yourself, use sunscreen with an SPF of 30 or higher and reapply every 2 hours. Ask for help with hard-to-reach places like your back and get your skin checked by a board-certified dermatologist at least once a year.
Putting SPF on your skin probably has the inverse effect on black people or melanated people as it does on white people. So the next time you get a really irritating chain message on WhatsApp, or you hear it on the media, or you even hear black doctors saying things like this.
You want to tell people to reapply your sunscreen at least every 2 hours, especially in the summer.
You now know that they're simply giving you either bad information or they are misinformed. This study would suggest that actually UV exposure has a positive effect on black people, and SPF will actually give you no help in protecting you from acral melanoma, which is the form of melanoma that black people tend to contract. Not only are black people substantially less likely to contract and therefore die from melanoma, the form of melanoma that we actually contract is not helped at all by sun protection formulas, and you're better off learning how to identify the signs and symptoms of acral melanoma, which I'm going to play on at the end of this video. In addition to this, a study conducted by the FDA found that the ingredients that are placed in many SPF formulas are actually clinically unsafe. Would I advise you putting SPF on your skin every 2 hours?
No, God! No, God, please, no!
The important work that needs to be done should be actually educating them in the real risks of melanoma, which are acral melanoma, which has got nothing to do with sun exposure. In fact, the evidence suggests that lack of sun exposure is what causes most harm to the skin of melanated people. But for some reason, this is not being communicated.
So sunscreen does have benefits, but it probably isn't going to decrease melanoma for most black individuals. And this is where the problem lies. Public health organizations and healthcare providers are telling the same message to everyone, including black people and other people of color. That message is very specific. Wear sunscreen to prevent melanoma. Here's why that's problematic. For a lot of black people, sunscreen is just an unnecessary expense. Why spend money on something when sunburns are infrequent and the product doesn't protect them from melanoma? Second, public health messaging to black people is dishonest again. Black communities already have much lower trust in the healthcare industry after centuries of mistreatment towards them. Yet, here we are, perpetuating these harmful patterns. To put this into perspective, recognize that we don't tell cis men to regularly check for breast cancer. So why are we telling black individuals to spend money in order to protect themselves from melanoma? Third, we're not communicating the important information that black individuals do need to know about melanoma. Namely, that they need to be looking for melanoma in locations that are not sun exposed. And as a result, black people may not know how to identify the melanoma that they're most likely to get, even if those prevalence rates are low.
In medical school, we learn about the ABCDEs in order to recognize melanoma. I won't go through all of these, but if you have an asymmetric mole that seems to have gone through changes in shape and size, is different colors, and is larger than 6 millimeters, you should check that out. It could be melanoma. But here's the thing that's important for black communities. There's a form of melanoma called acral lentiginous melanoma. It's one of the least common types of melanoma, but the most common in African American and Asian communities. It's typically found on the palms, on the bottom of your foot, on your nail beds, and can be mistaken as a bruise. Here's what it looks like on the bottom of a foot. Here's what it looks like on the nails.